Okay, I think he's going to start with his video. We'll talk about it later. Go ahead,
Sure.
Jose.
The pandemic has ruined business and has messed up the job situation.
Seriously, ma'am, just don't know what to do.
Something must work out.
CoLaBoRate. 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 Let's learn the way we'll do it. Let's learn to collaborate. Let's be the change and make the change. Liberate people, companies, employment your way. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. Let's collaborate. He's a leader, big, bright, and fast. They support in every daunting task. They pitch and scout and warning and hunting. They look out for the next in line. We're running my company and building up my brand. Fix always getting grace. Then focus on the task at hand. So now my jungle's open to the wolves among you. Opportunities to gain. Let's learn, go hunt and play. Work done just as easily. Bow, but I do my work so professionally. Bow, I want work, but I want it my way. I'm a liberated associate on the techno highway. Let's learn the way wolves do it. Let's learn to collaborate. Let's be the change and make the change. Liberate people, companies, employment your way. Let's collaborate. 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 Let's collaborate.
So good evening, everybody, and welcome to what's probably our 16th edition of the CoLaBoRate Talk Show. With me is Rahul Khanna, who is a restaurateur entrepreneur based in Delhi, studied at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne in Switzerland, and holds a BSc in International Hospitality Management. Observing the need to provide a fresh paradigm for lifestyle and hospitality sector in India, he founded Slang, a lifestyle concept company, in 2006. With his experience of working with the Mandarin Oriental Jumeirah in London, Hong Kong, and Dubai, he established himself as an expert in conceptualizing, designing, design-oriented F&B outlets, as well as curating special events, building brands and marketing them, plus honing his team's soft skills. As director at Azure Hospitality, he plays an intrinsic part in developing and managing the company brands Mama Goto, Daba, established 1986, Speedy Chow, Roll Mal, and the more boutique brands like Sly Granny, Hotel Del Mar, and Foxtrot, collectively known as Sly Stories. In 2008, he combined his passion for writing and architecture and wrote The Modern Architecture of New Delhi, 1928 to 2007, published by Random House. His keen eye for design is reflected in the offbeat and always quirky interiors you find at Slice Stories. When not working, Rahul can be found playing tennis, indulging in a good glass of wine, traveling, reading, or just relaxing with his dogs. That's Rahul. Welcome, Rahul. And Bikramjit Ray.
Thank you.
Bikramjit Ray is the editor of ET Hospitality World, has more than 2 decades of experience spanning print, TV, and digital journalism. He has been covering the hospitality and food business for more than 15 years. He used to be the assistant editor features India Today. While he was with Today, he wrote, produced, and edited the first and best-selling Today 100 Food Guide and was involved in the Today Golden Plates Award, which was held in 2005. Was the editor, Food and Hospitality from August 2009 to 11, that's 2 years. Anchored, produced, researched The Secret Kitchen. He's an experienced editorial hand with a demonstrated history of working in the events service industry, skilled in crisis communication, breaking news, hospitality industry journalism, and media. Strong media and communication professional with a Bachelor of Arts focused in political science and government political science and government from Jadavpur University. So welcome to Rahul and Bikram. Nice to have you on the show. I'll come to you some questions with you all, but first, what are we doing on the show? So HTI has launched an app called the CoLaBoRate app. And this app is based on what is called the gig economy or the gig culture, which is essentially freelance employees, freelance work exchange. That means someone is a freelancer and offers to work for an organization and an organization looking for a freelancer. So CoLaBoRate connects the two. More on that later. Anyway, I myself am Dominic, and I'm the director of Hospitality Training Institute and the founder of the CoLaBoRate app. So my team and I have been working across India doing training, and recently launched this app, which is something very new and interesting for us. It's given us a peep into a different world. So earlier you had permanent employees and the fixed term contracts, and now bringing out this whole concept, which is an old concept, but getting more formal in India with the government recognizing gig workers and defining them in their social security code. So once we launched the CoLaBoRate app, we realized that a lot of people don't know about freelancing. They don't know the avenues. They don't know how good or bad it is. How they could build themselves up as brands. Is it something to be afraid of? Is it something that is interesting? So we started doing these series of CoLaBoRate talk shows where I invite eminent personalities like we have today, Rahul and Bikramjit, to talk to you all. And so the first part of it is where I talk to them, and some of you have been on the show before, so you know that. And the second part is where you can ask your questions directly to the panelists, either by unmuting yourself, which we will allow you to do, or by posting it in the Q&A section. So now to my panelists. First question to Rahul. Rahul, obviously many reasons why you got into business, but looking back, what is the single or maybe few biggest reasons that you still stay in running business? I mean, you didn't opt for something else.
I think to me, when I look back, and I was thinking about this just a few days ago, I think there's no other business that I can think of apart from F&B that allows me to cross-pollinate a few sort of parallel interests I have. You mentioned my interest in architecture and design. That's addressed when I work with our architects and designers. I have a passion for food. I have a massive passion for branding and creating experiences and creating the intangible. So that also allows me to do that. And more recently, I think in the last 8-9 years, I've realized that I also love the idea of a responsibility for a lot of the frontline workers. And this is obviously COVID has only heightened this, but the fact that in India, 90% of the people who are frontline workers in our industry are not there by choice. They'd rather be doctors, engineers, etc., etc. They're there because of a certain in life they haven't been dealt a good hand, so they're hence they're washing dishes or peeling onions. And how do you then motivate the intrinsically demotivated from the get-go? So this idea of whether you call it leadership or being a motivator is another interest that I've only now developed ever since I've become an entrepreneur. But yeah, this marries all of these things, right? Being a leader, trying to rather be a leader, be interested in architecture and design and branding and marketing. So in a way, this allows me an even playing field to put various hats on. And it's extremely challenging, it's extremely motivating, it's extremely grueling, and it's also extremely enhancing of my own self, because I feel you definitely feel like you're growing on the job every day because the challenges are so different every day. So that's sort of how I see it.
Okay. Thanks, Rahul. I've got some follow-up questions, but first I'll bring Bikramjit in on this. So Bikramjit, as a veteran journalist, and you've probably interviewed and met thousands of people, right? What in your opinion makes them, so this is a little different. I mean, what in your opinion makes them happy or unhappy on the job? So I'm not talking from, just journalism. I'm talking about the people in hospitality you meet. So what would you think makes them happy, like, let's get on with it, or unhappy and say, let's get out of this? You're on mute, Bikram.
I am not as technologically astute as not so veteran journalists can be. What I'm saying is, let me turn that question around a bit. First, why do I like working in the hospitality industry is because I nearly joined the hospitality industry, but then decided I was too lazy to get into the kitchen or whatever. So that's a cop out, but I've always been very interested in what's happening. And the thing that attracts me to hospitality is I think it is an industry which employs the most incredible variety of people. And I think Rahul will agree with me. You will find every kind of people working in hospitality. And the thing that drives the people who are successful is the fact that they have been able to identify their passion. And when I'm saying passion, I mean, I have met restaurateurs who may not be that interested in food, but they make up for it by being fantastic in guest service, being fantastic in running the business, while as others have a passion for food, and that is just overwhelms everything else. And that is something that I can understand. So I think it's the passion, and I've been reporting extensively through the last 2 years, and and it's been a really, really, really tough time for everyone. But that passion is still there. People still don't want to give up. That, of course, is a downside of the industry in India. And Rahul will know a lot of his competitors who don't do well keep changing because they don't want to give up. They don't want to say, okay, I've had it. Now I know I will not succeed. That doesn't exist in our book. So that is a disadvantage.
So you're saying the passion is what keeps them there. What do you think will take them out of there? What makes them unhappy?
What makes them unhappy is when people don't seem to be agreeing with what they're doing, which happens in a lot of great restaurants, a lot of very mediocre restaurants. And I've been to restaurants where they're absolutely wedded to their concept, but as soon as you get in, because it's not going to work. So how do you tell them? So it takes, you have to have some certain level of dogmatism. You have to have certain level of, drive to be in the industry, because it is an industry which, you will continue smiling even if someone comes and says, especially if you're in North India. And Rahul, I think you agree, because North Indian customers are the most wonderful customers. They know what they want, and they don't mind telling you that, even if you give them something and they will say, "Nahi, please take it back and do something else." It's not a French restaurant in France where the chef can tell you to get out because you don't agree with what he's doing.
Okay. So I hear you there. And see, Rahul, you mentioned something. So I told you I want to come back to something. So you mentioned about, seeing staff from a different light, and that you've developed a passion for the bottom of the pyramid, if I were to label it that way. So what are your plans on it, and what made you see that? I mean, what was the pain area that you saw and then decided to do something about it? Or
I think a lot of this got heightened more as soon as we opened a restaurant in London, because I realized that how different it is just in terms of it's a very unregulated industry, right? People in the bottom of the pyramid have zero social security. Employers can treat them however which they want to. They're not protected by any legal framework, etc. And a lot of them are migrants who've come looking for work, etc. And at the same time, the irony is that they're the ones who pay for my salary, right? If they're not performing, if they're not happy. So there's this weird dichotomy which I never understood in India. I mean, of course, if you take away a lot of the branded stuff, if you take away, the Oberoi Hotel and what the Tatas do with Taj, they have a very solid foundation of looking after their frontline employees. But the unregulated restaurant sector really does not. In fact, it's funny, when you speak to certain competitors of ours without naming any of them, they sort of laugh sometimes at the fact that because we're private equity funded, we have to pay everything by the book. We have to do everything, ESI, PF, everything has to be done by check, everything has to be above board. And they feel that in a way we're eating into our margins, so there's a complete mindset change which is required. And I feel especially now with COVID, everybody's been putting their hands up saying, oh, well, the government didn't do anything for our frontline workers or for the industry, which is also a fact. But
So,
I always turn around
Rahul,
and
we are
question to say,
losing you
well,
in
what?
between. Huh?
Sorry?
I don't know. No, I felt I was losing you. So,
Okay.
but I got it.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that whenever people have been grumbling that, well, the government should have done more to bail out the industry, I always sort of say, you know what, when the going was good, what were we doing to bail out our frontline workers? Now that COVID happened, it's very easy to put our hands up and say, well, so I just feel there's a compassion that needs to come in, because very often we just talk about, revenue and bottom line and branding, but who's actually working with their bare hands, right? And so irony is that those are the ones that have to be looked after the most.
And going with what Rahul is saying in continuation to, and I must have to agree with him in the fact that we don't look after our workers in this industry. And it's not the fault that it's unregulated. It is the fault for a lot of guys who do a great, make a lot of money and are, pre-COVID. And I think COVID is an opportunity for us to throw away the old playbooks and start something new. I think that's very needed. And I'm not only talking about, it's great that he spoke about the Indian hotel companies and Dominic, you will be able to also weigh in here, because during this pandemic, the international chains have let go of a lot of people.
Yeah, not the Indian.
There are a lot, and the Indian hotel companies have looked after them better. They may have let go of some people, I am not sure, but they've definitely been able to hold on to and look after their people better. Why is that? I mean, don't say that, because, oh, I'm a management company and the workers are not, the employees are not my employees. They're employees of the
Very
owner.
true. Wash your hands
There is
off
some responsibility. So, that is why when you spoke about gig economy, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying gig economy is great in our context if you're young, so you don't need your income as such. Unfortunately, that's the case. If you're young or you're so experienced that you can use your experience to do more than one or two things, right, Rahul? Like you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess COVID's definitely shifted the goalposts, but I do agree that there's a slight schism that's created, right, with a lot of owners and business operators having to let go of people. I think the idea is to say that fine, the gig economy is a global phenomenon; it's here to stay, no doubt. But let's also look at the symptoms of why we've reached here.
Yeah.
So what I've heard you all saying is something a bit contradictory, because Bikramjit is of the opinion that the Indian hotel companies have looked after their staff better, whereas Rahul says that maybe the Indian hotel restaurateurs or the
I'm talking about the unregulated sector. I think my fraternity, the restaurant fraternity, I think can do a much better job in general. COVID, no COVID, but I think historically, ITC, Taj, Oberoi have definitely always been at the forefront of being, I wouldn't say unbelievable employers, but have definitely held a spine of principle and ethics and, protecting their frontline workers. when needed. I mean, the greatest case study is what Taj did during the terror attack in Bombay, right?
Very true.
Unheard of. That level of dedication
True.
is almost unheard of, right? Globally. So I think there's a lot that and I think Bikramjit's got a good point there, that because there is a lot of, I mean, we've just recently heard the story about the Hyatt Regency in Bombay. And it's very easy for the owner to say, well, I don't have the money, and Hyatt saying, well, the owner is not paying salaries, we are holier than thou. Well, surely there is something that can be done to protect them. So I think the gig economy, I agree, is definitely here to stay, and it's a great flexible option for a lot of people. But it's nice to at least have some anchoring to say, you know what, when the going's tough, my boss is going to look out for me. And then you keep looking for your gigs. Why not? I mean, more the merrier, right? Everybody wants more revenue or more income at the end of the day.
And you can ask any freelancer in any profession, and they will tell you that work is always done on time and payment doesn't happen on time. You could ask a restaurateur who does work on certain goals, and he will tell you, we will supply on time, but the payment will always be a little late. So that is a reality of our country. And the other thing, Dominic, it's great, and there's so many young people, and it's fantastic that there is no brand loyalty as far as hospitality, hotels, as far as workers are concerned, has gone out the window. Except for the Indian brands, they don't care anymore, because they know if your brand, if a Marriott or a Hyatt or a Hilton or any of the international brands, if they don't stand with you, then what is the use of being part of the brand?
True.
So I'm going to play a bit of a devil's advocate here from both sides, actually. See, you have on one side, you have a brand or an organization, and the other side, you have the employees, right? We are talking about the laws that should look after the employees, right? Do you think from the employee side also, there needs to be a bit more reciprocation? Because I have personally worked with very good companies as a trainer. And when you're dealing with these organizations, you see that intrinsically the owners want to look after their staff. But there are times when I find that, staff behave in what I could call unethical ways, like, quitting without proper notice, taking advances and then quitting and not clearing them. So the owner had the good, behaved well with you and gave you an advance, knowing it's over and above your salary. Then you quit without paying. So don't you think it needs to be, a sort of a symbiotic association where both sides look out for each other? And this is a very strange question, considering I've got Rahul on the panel, who is a restaurateur himself.
No, I totally agree with you. I think, see, coming back to my London example, it's this unregulation in India goes both ways, right? I mean, for example, when we have to let go of somebody in London, it's a very clear contract. The contract is actually not just a piece of paper that HR makes, and if needed, we can always wing it in India. There is no such thing there, right? And similarly, the other way around, if the employee feels they're being unlawfully or unfairly asked to leave, or, I mean, it's amazing. The first thing we had to do is hire an HR legal agency to tell us, because we are coming from such a different mindset in India, to understand what are the various loopholes that we need to be clear on, so that we can be fair to our employees and be fair to ourselves. And it's crazy how much, I mean, it could be something as simple as and because it's part of this international woke culture, and sometimes I feel it goes too far, but for example, it could be something as simple as me complimenting our hostess about how well she's performed, and if it's misconstrued as sexual harassment, she has a very valid case, So it can open up a whole Pandora's box. But the good news is, at least there are very clear black and white demarcations of what is fair practice and what isn't. In India, we don't have such things. So every employer makes their own constitution. ITC will say, we stand on this pedestal. Certain unregulated restaurateurs in my fraternity may not care, and they may not even be paying taxes. They may not even be paying Provident Fund. And that's their constitution, right? And from their view, it's correct because they're making money, they're expanding. So what's wrong with that, right? So I think that's where there's it goes both ways. I think, you want to protect employees, you also want to protect yourselves. But because there's no real regulation as such, everybody is kind of creating their own playbook.
I agree with Rahul is saying, and I think, it is all a kind of outcome because of our wealth gap. Because in our country, you will always find people who will work for you, even at lower salaries. They may not do such a great job, but you can take
Yeah.
5 of them. That is the reality. And, that is the other big issue with people who become senior. The more senior you get, the more expensive it gets. So you're actually fighting for your job so that, 3 younger guys can't be, you get my point.
Yeah.
I think Dominic and I will have a better idea of this.
So I'm having a bit of a network issue. So sometimes I'm losing you guys, and there's also a constant call coming in from somebody who I don't know and is refusing to stop calling. Anyway, so the what I heard you saying, Rahul, is that yes, both sides need to rethink about how they approach the whole situation. When we talk about freelancing, right now, let's say I'm a permanent employee with you. When you talk about freelancing, I need to obviously, this question is to both of you, to build my brand as a freelancer, right? What are the points you think that I could build my brand, keeping in mind that the unprofessionalism could probably go against me, which we just spoke about, quitting without notice or taking on a gig and not delivering. So keeping that in context, what do you think I could do to build my brand as a gigger, a freelancer?
Go ahead, Bikramjit.
I think the most important thing for any person building a brand as a gigger is dependability. You have to do what you say you want to do and in the time that you do it.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. So you have to meet all expectations. You meet your expectations and you will be able to meet, do your brand. So do not overcommit. In our country, we have this whole thing of overcommitting. And also you go to a meeting, you overcommit, and the guy on the other side of the table knows you're screwing around. He knows you're overcommitting. So that is the real fallacy of this whole situation. Rahul, am I...
Yeah, I know. And also I feel like typically, let's assume if I wasn't looking at with, the optics of a gig economy, and let's say I was just looking at it purely as a hire, we are in a way trained through our own subconscious of living in India with a certain amount of cynicism, certain amount of skepticism of assuming the other person is not very trustworthy to begin with, right? And it takes us time to build that trust, to understand, yeah, this is the right person. So I think when you look at a gigger, if I were to look at a gigger, I think my first instinct always is, and again, this is just a trigger instinct. It may not be fair, it may not be correct, but the first instinct a little bit always is, what's dal mein kuch kala hai? Why is this person not being, unless I realize that this person does have a very, very strong background, a very strong CV around which he's building a gig network, then I say, okay, there's definitely something here. But and I guess it's chicken and egg, because you need to first, for young people, obviously it's a bit more difficult, and it's a great way to find what you want to do in life, right?
So how do you think they should build that trust? How do you think they should build that trust?
I think a lot toward Bikramjit's point is to also walk the talk, right? If you're saying that this is what you can deliver, like I'll give you a simple example. Like the closest I can think of to a gigger is, very often I'll get calls from people that, listen, my son or so-and-so is not sure about this industry, but wants to come and do a small internship with you, right? So we're like, okay, fine, no problem. So someone will show up and, next day they'll be late, won't come, realize that this is not for them. They can't be standing on their feet for 12 hours. Or they feel, oh, this is not as glorious as I thought it was, because, hospitality has this weird sheen about it. Once you get behind the fingernails, you realize that it's a bit crazy. So, they'll bail on you, or they'll start lying, and it's quite obvious, oh, today I'm not well, today I'm this, today I'm that. So what happens is, we've made this investment, we've said, okay, we're expecting someone today. Let's give them a small induction. Let's, give them a nice experience. And that sort of just falls apart. And I would say out of 10 interns that we've had, 6 have been disappointing, right? So I think this idea of at least being able to say, if I'm a gigger, let's wait this out. The first 5 days may not be good, but gradually, at least I know that I have the right mentality for this. And then, as Bikramjit was saying, then walk the talk, right? If you are promising on something, learn to start delivering. As opposed, because you're not going to be young forever, but you'll just keep experimenting.
And the other thing, Dominic, and this, because we come from a generation where we were told to value other people's time, which is actually, for Rahul to give an hour up of his time, and walk someone through a whole process is probably more it's a bigger hit to his profit line than for him to give a certain amount of money to this guy as a as a little
Understood.
honorarium, while, right? Am I correct, Ram?
Yeah,
Because
so
Yeah,
there's
I
a
mean, yeah.
value for Rahul's time, obviously, because I mean he's selling that time to that gigger
so you
or
have
to
to
the
so you have to think of your life in hours. We used to think our life in, we still, most of us think of life in months, na, कि 1 तारीख को आएगा, 2 तारीख को आएगा, then you're
Yeah, and just to add to this, I think what happens is it also sets in motion a negative loop of assumptions to everybody down the line that people who come temporarily are typically not worthy,
not reliable.
or they're not
So-
reliable. They don't have the same values and ethics. So it becomes a self-prophecy, right? Because the more that happens, it becomes a negative loop. So I think to stop that, giggers have to definitely realize that reliability and walking the talk is so important for the sake of the other giggers as well, right? Because that perception is only built because of a few bad apples, and the whole company then assumes, sir, kal se ye intern chodo, hum apna hiring karenge, and then that whole thing just shuts shop, right? The shutters come down, and we don't want to do this because once bitten, twice shy. Why go through this rigmarole? So I think that's very important.
do you employ part-time freelance giggers in your company?
We do, in the sense of what we were doing at some point. For example, let's look at Khan Market in Delhi. We have 2-3 restaurants there. We have some industry friends who have 2-3 restaurants there. So we realize, we've got 1 or 2 maintenance sort of guys, who'll come and do their basic maintenance works, plumbers. They're in the market the whole day. They can run up and down. So we started sharing a little bit of that because it wasn't affecting the service experience. This was more back-end stuff. Today, in fact, as we speak, I'm looking for freelance graphic designers because, sometimes I want to do a website, or I want something that I don't need all the time. So they can come and plug that gap for me. In fact, in London, this is quite common. You will do a few people who'll pop in, but again, they come with good CVs, and it's, like I said, the gig economy is much more mature there. So these people are already working in some very good restaurants. And because London's expensive, it's COVID time, they'll say, listen, it's my day off. And okay, this guy works for XYZ chef or XYZ, this guy is legit, and it helps us because wage costs in London are crazy. So it helps us with, evening out our budget. So there are horses for courses. But yeah, we are using it, but one needs to see how we can build a culture of perception that says that this is a reliable way of looking for work and employing for work.
So Bikramjit, Rahul missed out mentioning that he's hired me as a gigger also, because besides my company training for him, for about 5 years, I was the coach for his team.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so no, that I was going to say that the other thing, other than being dependable, is the other very important thing, and this happens with most of the younger people who come into the gig economy, is that you have to know how good or bad you are. Because everyone comes in with expectations, and those expectations are sky high. They think they are the most brilliant person on the planet, and they are, God's gift to the profession. But your employer, Rahul or Bikramjit, may not think so.
No, and I must add to
so
this.
you're saying a self-assessment.
Honest self-assessment.
Yeah, and also just to add to this, I also feel, and maybe we're just sounding like a bunch of old people now, but I just feel that people today who are under 28, 27, I find it amazing that they have this strange combination of entitlement in terms of this is the minimum I feel I should be earning, but it's there's no correlation to talent or experience. But there's this entitlement that because I'm this millennial and because of whatever it may be, and I find it very strange that, okay, on what, and even when it comes to, for example, let's say they've done 1 year of experience in let's say they're a graphic designer. When it comes to they're changing jobs, in the old days, even if you got a 5% increment to your previous job, you said, you know what, that's a good start. Their minimum, and with a straight face, they'll tell you that, I expect at least 30% more than my previous job. And my first question is, on what basis? And it's just because they just feel they're in demand, and it comes from this warped sense of entitlement. Which isn't true. So I think, and again, I don't know where this comes from.
So,
perhaps a psychologist
Rahul,
can tell you what's wrong with millennials, but
no,
there
Rahul
is this
and
sense there.
Bikram, I think you all are, both of you all are dealing, like Rahul, I know, deals with a lot of interior guys and graphic designers, and Bikramjit
I
obviously
don't
deals with
I don't
journalists.
deal
So
yeah, but
you deal with writers. So
no, but
both these hang on there. Both these categories are the educated, unemployed, or recently employed. But it need not be applicable, let's say, Rahul, to a waiter or
Yeah, I agree.
a captain who is less educated and has a realistic opinion of his capabilities
Yes.
But
as well as the
Dominic,
market.
but Dominic, you don't understand. The uneducated waiter doesn't want to be part of the gig economy. He wants to have a steady job with support. That is the mistake we are making, because the
No,
people who
not
want to get
necessary.
into the
Bikram, not necessary, because your Zomato, Swiggy,
they have no other
Uber,
choice. No, they are getting people who don't get
they are all.
into a steady job. I mean, they would, if they were given similar
No,
salaries.
I think they are opted for it, because whereas Zomato, Swiggy, urban company also is employing a vast number of giggers. So I don't think that would necessarily be true.
I also feel maybe there's a distinction to be made when we're talking of gig, at least in my understanding, is that I'm assuming a lot of them may even have a permanent job and do this on the side.
Very true.
But to Bikramjit's
Yeah.
point, yeah, if they have no job, then it's definitely a little tricky in terms of what value add can they give you if they're not holding any job. And if they're not holding any job, that typically sometimes means there's an experience lag or there's a vacuum there, which is a little scary as a potential employer of that gig worker. So I think that's something that also maybe we should look at in our discussion.
And
Yeah,
I think
so-
also, Dominic, you need to have
Yeah.
a minimum level of support for everybody, which is not happening. Your support is your family, basically. Everybody's
Right.
support is their family. And this is something that we have realized more during COVID. And Rahul, I'm sure you would agree with me. That is, it's come down to that. I mean, you don't,
No, I didn't understand that. What do you mean by minimum amount of support?
if you're in a gig economy and you're going from job to job, you need some level of support. Maybe it's income support, maybe it's some kind of a government kind of policy which gives you support. It's some kind of a,
A parachute.
not a parachute, but something that will keep you off the minimum, keep you off from scraping the bottom. Because what happens in gig work is, it's highly competitive. Everybody's trying to fight you. So unless you're really good, you will always have ups and downs.
I guess even if you're good, you should have ups and downs.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a question of
But
realize.
Yeah, but Dominic, I think this is why it's linked, right? Like earlier when we were saying reliability, dependability, trust is important. That's essentially what your differentiator needs to be, right? When you are competing with the other giggers. So your differentiator is then some form of experience, some form of reliability, so that people realize, coming back to my London example of when I know that this person has worked or is working for XYZ brand or XYZ chef, I already know that this person's coming with a certain amount of skill, possibly mentality. And it's fine. I know that for the next 9 hours while he's with me on that day off that he has, there'll be no issues as such. And then obviously, once you get to know them, they become, they're on your speed dial and you keep calling them back, right? Based on your experience. And then it becomes more of a weekly setup, as opposed to each time we need to know. And that's one of the challenges. So coming back to the gig economy, even in India, like 90% of our housekeeping attendants are outsourced, right? They work for an agency.
Very true. Yeah.
And one of the biggest challenges we have with that, and where my HR is always pulling their hair, and so is our operations team, is that every other day, not even every other week, there'll be a completely new guy who'll show up who has no idea of the ABC of our restaurant. And then we every second day have to say, okay, listen, this is where the bloody soap is, this is where the detergent is, this is the time we get busy, this is where you put the empty plates, this is where you put the dirty plates, make sure you don't break anything. So then let's say a good guy is there for 4 days, and we're like, okay, this is great, we'll call up their supervisor, please make sure he keeps coming back. Next day he's disappeared for life, right? So that's the other challenge with India, coming back to the unregulation and coming back to itna janta hai, there's so many people that we can still pull out. Even if 10 guys disappear, 100 will line up. But the amount it takes to just have to reteach them each time that, okay, you're brand new. Now you have to again teach them, who's Ram and who's Sita of this Ramayana every week. So what happens is, coming back to time wasting, my manager of the restaurant, or rather he spends time client facing, doing his stuff.
Rather than handling the back end.
Yeah, and then he's sitting there in that dishwasher saying, "Aise karo, aise karo, aise karo."
So
And then
just to clarify, Rahul, you have three ways, right? The permanent, the FTC, the fixed term contract, and the gigger. So right now, when you're hiring through an agency, that is your fixed term contract. I mean, you're handling over a contract to an agency, and they're sending the. So a gigger would ideally you would deal directly with him. So if I'm your housekeeping boy, you'd be dealing directly with me, like you mentioned about, for example, that plumber or the carpenter who's roaming around in Khan market. Yeah. So there, the reliability would be, in fact, even more than dealing with a contractor, because the contractor
it would be, it should be. Let's put it that.
It should be, theoretically speaking, it should be.
The only slight caveat to that is the sort of bandwidth of dealing with these individuals. You know, tomorrow, let's say you're in midst of an expansion spree, or even at steady state, you know, I can imagine our HR calling and saying, "Sir, I'm happy to do this for you," and it's working, but you know, having to deal with 20 giggers each time, and their payment, and literally their daily wage, you know, this is a lot of admin bandwidth that also gets
very
sucked.
true.
And right, so that's important.
As Rahul was saying, on the other side, say this guy who's come for 4 days and worked in Rahul's restaurant, because the Indian market is also so big, on the 5th day he can disappear, and he knows he can go somewhere and say, "Yes, I worked in Azure Hospitality," to some other restaurant somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
actually, by the way, both you and Rahul have done me a big favor. You're literally selling the concept of the app, because the app does the administrative protocol that Rahul was talking about, you know, maintaining the log of how much
so
you owe to the
that's
person.
important. That's important.
Yeah. And coming to what Bikramjit said, that if on the 5th day he scams you, you would put it over there in his rating that he is not reliable, right? Which would affect his potential of being employed. As against in the previous method, I mean, Rahul and I've worked in the operations, and I've seen that people just, you know, don't care, because they leave one restaurant and will literally join the restaurant next door. The guy will hire them because he doesn't have a choice, at least in the pre-COVID environment.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
okay, so now what I'm going to do,
I think
just a second, Bikramjit. I'm inviting people to post your questions in the Q&A box, and I will start. There's already a question in. You can post your question in the Q&A box. You can also raise your hand, and Jervis, who's the producer, will unmute you and allow you to speak. Right? Sorry, Bikramjit, go ahead.
So I'm saying the other thing that is happening after, you know, what Rahul was saying about the plumber. This is happening especially after COVID, is the multi-skilling of people. You know what hotels normally do, say with the laundry service, they get one laundry does hotel for 5 or 7 things. So it's been realized, like, your housekeeping can be totally outsourced if you want to be. You know, there are agencies who are now outsourcing even waiters.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the old banquet guys used to do, right?
Yeah. So they need to improve their service quality. You can spot a guy who's come in from outside by the shirt and pant he wears. When you go to a shadi, you know kahan se kaun hai.
Yeah, that is the typical banquet issue.
That unfortunately is the truth in our country, and then that also comes into this wealth gap thing. Somebody is willing to come in for 200 rupees and also work, 200 rupees and khana. And somebody will say, who's 28 years old, will say, "I want 80,000 rupees as a gigger."
Okay.
Yeah.
So Hitesh Chawla has been posting a lot, and he says that that's where HTA comes into the picture and trains your staff periodically. So Hitesh Chawla, just for information, is a restaurateur who's part of the audience, and we've got a question for you all. I think this would be aimed at Rahul. What if the gigger has a rating from a different chef? Then would you trust him? So another chef of another brand has rated a gigger chef. Then would you trust him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on what the pedigree of the chef who's rating, what is his sort of background, but yeah, it definitely will add some credibility for sure. But I think one will have to dig a little deeper. It also depends what role that gigger is coming in for, right? If the gigger is just coming to chop vegetables, you know, it's a very different situation than if he's coming to roll sushi in the restaurant, right? So I think it also depends horses for courses, and we'll have to take those references with that pinch of salt, depending on what the requirement is. So if the gigger is, like I said, coming just to do basic prep work, then that's fine. But yeah, I think fundamentally, I think prima facie, the answer is yeah, it definitely adds credibility. That shouldn't be a hindrance.
Okay. Rahul, sir, you've created fabulous brands through Azure. Do you use giggers? I think you've already answered that, but would you like to take it again?
Yeah, I think very similar. I think we've used a little bit with maintenance, sometimes with graphic design. Like I said, more in the UK, we've used part-time workers for sure, or giggers as you call them. I think here, in terms of our restaurants in India, we've to date we've not used any gigger who is customer facing or is doing something that is of a specialized skill in the kitchen. But yeah, if somebody wants to, like I said, we've worked.
Rahul, you used a gigger. No, you used a gigger for the kitchen. There was that lady who used to come down from Thailand.
Yeah. But again, she had, yeah, you're right. I think she had obviously certain. In fact, even there was a lady from France who we used a lot when we were launching Sly Granny. But again, they like I keep coming back to credibility, reliability, trust. I think if that's there, and also the references are so strong, then you know very often the reference is enough to tell you everything you want to know about the people. The CV doesn't make any sense beyond a point. So I think that works. What we've done is now, I think, coming to this thing of housekeeping, possibly more maintenance. I think in those areas, definitely we could do something. Home delivery could be an option to help us lessen our reliance on the aggregators and pay those commissions. Perhaps, the odd delivery guys could be an option. And like I said, for graphic design, we often use people because that's something that's quite an expensive cost monthly. But sometimes you just need something done and you give it to them and they come back in a week and they have something ready for you. So that's a definite option. The other thing I would add, though, in fact, I was just having a chat literally 2 hours ago, is one thing I think would be great for a gigger is if he has a specialty cuisine that he's good at. So let's assume if I'm a chef and I work at a specialty, for example, in Bombay, you guys have these great Malwani restaurants, right?
Very true.
And let's say I'm working in one of these, let's call it Jai Hind Lunch Home, is one of my favorites. So if I'm working in Jai Hind Lunch Home in, Prabha Devi, and on my day off, let's say I get to know you and I say, listen, I have this delivery brand that does regional Indian food. And I would love 5 of your best Malwani dishes. Come and do a knowledge transfer and buzz off. That would be amazing. If they can come in with knowledge, because I think very often the gig economy, intrinsically, the balance of power lies with the guy who's appointing you, because there's a need that he has and you're coming to just plug his need.
Address it.
Yeah. Whereas here you are coming to plug in some knowledge. There's a big difference. So if you have knowledge, that is power, right? So if
you're saying moving from BPO to KPO.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do some of that, like tomorrow, if I don't know, there's some great Nehari Halim chef in one of these great ITC hotels, and he's like, listen, yaar, I'm on the gig economy. I'll be giving my right hand and say, come, teach me what you know. You learn from the masters. Teach me for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I'll pay you more than I probably should even, right? Because that stuff's invaluable once I get it into my knowledge bank. So for chefs, that way, there's a great opportunity. Similarly, for the bartender, maybe he's worked in a cruise line and he knows how to make some amazing drinks. And I need, rather than me having to see, because what happens is when you're expanding or when you have a large company, you're anyway trying to keep the wheels in motion. So to stop the wheels and have your guy come out, make you a menu, it's a little bit more tedious as opposed to saying, you know what, I've got a guy, he's going to come in, look what he's doing, knowledge transfer is done, everybody's happy, everybody wins. So if gig economy guys can see how they can bring in knowledge to the table and not just saying I'm a pair of hands, that's really where you can be a differentiator.
So both of you, your views on, let's say, how a DJ goes touring, right? City to city, literally, and he earns a name. Do you think there's potential for chefs to do that, for a bartender to do that?
What is Avijit Ghosh doing? What is Yangdup Lama doing? They are pretty much part of the gig economy.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of guys as consultants. Technically,
Sabi goes around all over the country cooking.
Yeah, but see,
Okay.
again, it comes back with serious credibility then,
Yeah,
right?
you need
To
for that
reach
you need-
there, to reach there, you need to have earned your stripes. No? So I think that's the tricky bit. It's very chicken and egg. To reach there, you have to have really said, I've been there, done that. I know this game. And that's when people will pay you top dollar then, right? Or even if you have a very specific knowledge, perhaps you have something that you could be very young. Like, I'll give you an example, right? All I'm looking for permanently right now is a content creator for my Instagram pages. In fact, the brief I've told HR is I just want one of these geeky, fresher kids who's on TikTok all day, who knows nothing else in life, is just so, doing this bakwas all day. I want one of those guys to come and jazz up my Instagram and create content in my restaurant. I don't want any guy who's into analytics and knows.
prepare to be disappointed, Rahul.
Yeah. So I said, I just want that guy. So, and I said, I'm willing to have this person permanently in my company who just is like a kida in my restaurants, just doing this shit all day. If I see him in my office, that means he's fired. I want him to be on the shop floor, just doing this all day. So now that specific thing you can get sitting on your couch at home, right? You don't have to go and learn this. A lot of these young kids, you're just intrinsically into this because that's the young brigade of today, right? Technology just comes instinctively to you as opposed to...
Because agencies do not know how to deal with social media. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they don't, and they'll keep manaving stories, and we've gone through that. And the other problem, Anyway.
So Rahul, I have a suggestion. Put up this post on the app. Let's see what we can do for you.
No, please do it. I need somebody like literally tomorrow because I've realized rather than doing all this.
No, so you can do it in all the cities. No, you don't have to do it only in Delhi. You put up a post, and the guy who per post that he puts up that you accept, you pay him per post that you accept.
Yeah. The only thing is but coming back to my analogy of teaching the housekeeper every day how to clean the dishes, I have to then start telling the gigger from every day that what are my brand standard templates? What is my colors? What are my fonts?
Okay. So that also can be worked out, but it's going into the app too deep, so I'm coming out of that. There's a question for Bikramjit. Do you offer gig employment to writers in your publication?
Well, my publication is part of the Economic Times group, so we do. We are a whole host of publications. Now I'm just one of a bigger picture.
Yeah, and I'm a gigger with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Regularly give my column there. Okay, so what level of designations would you prefer to hire giggers at? I think that's already answered. You're taking them at a higher level, lower level, chefs. Okay.
I think I have a feeling mid-level, utna nahi, but low level and very senior level. These are the two which.
Okay, so you're saying it's at the two ends of the spectrum, the very low and the very high. Bikramjit sir, have you freelanced? So
yes,
I will expand it and you have.
Yes,
I was going to expand it to Rahul also.
Then I worked for NDTV Good Times. I did a show called Fat Man and 13 Brides, which is a huge hit. So I was a freelance anchor. I produced and anchored the show.
How long was that? How many years or
2011.
Months? Okay.
Actually, NDTV Good Times was quite pioneering for its time.
But I've realized I can't do this freelance. I am old fashioned. I need my salary at the end of the month. I mean, even business is something that I can't get my head around. It's the way I've grown up.
Yeah, correct. No, it's good to know where you belong and where you don't. So, Rahul, have you freelanced?
I'm trying to think yes. So very, very briefly, in fact, when I was in college, I used to do it a lot. In Switzerland, we used to get these gigs where we would get minimum wage and just go to banquets and stuff like that. It was great for pocket money. So that I did a lot. In fact, my favorite one ever was I was in the green room of Miss Switzerland. So I was in the green room of Miss Switzerland doing a
Miss World Switzerland.
Oh my God.
No.
Yeah.
Did they pay you to do that gig?
Yeah, exactly. So that was perhaps my best gig experience. But then when I published my book on architecture, I got a call from Design Today to write these guest articles, which was really fun. I wasn't really getting paid much, but it was never about the money. And that was really fun. So I think I did 5-6 articles for 5-6 issues. And then somehow that just fizzled out. But those are the two examples I can think of. As a student, I did a lot of it. And that was really fun because we went to see a lot of Switzerland. We got on trains. We went to various random weddings or banquets, openings of supermarkets, and whatever we could get, we would do on weekends, which I think all students do anyway, right, in college. So I think there was nothing really unusual barring the Miss Switzerland example, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, I can just think of this writing thing that I did a little bit. Otherwise, yeah, I help my wife a little bit at home with her business. I don't know if that's freelance, but maybe
Unpaid freelance.
perhaps.
Okay. Rahul, a question for you, and probably I could flip it to Bikramjit also. Would you encourage and be happy or feel insecure if the gig worker from your restaurant is also working at a competitor's outlet?
Good question. Well, it depends how transparent they're being, right? I mean, if I start to find out from other sources, it's a little bit strange. I think if they're very upfront, especially in this day and age, right? I think, let's say certain people in our company, I think are still on 80-85% of their actual salaries, and we're gradually building back up. So right now, I totally understand. I think we have to be empathetic and understanding of that. But as long as there's a very clear contract, when I say contract, I mean like a man's word, not a piece of paper, between your boss and you to say, listen, this is what I'm doing. Is it okay? Or even if it's not okay, I really need to do this. That's a very different conversation as opposed to saying, well, I've heard you're doing this. Why didn't you tell me? So there's obviously a trust deficit there. But yeah,
so, no, I like your answer, but the question was different. So what you're saying is, if a permanent employee with you is doing a gig, but I think the question is, would you be okay with a gig worker working at your place and a gig worker work? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing with India, right? I mean, it's so hard to protect your intellectual property here. In fact, thrice it's happened in our experience where the exact dish has the exact name, has the exact recipe, and it's belonging to another brand, and we've sent certain court notices or whatever, and it's so the answer I would say is probably no, unless again if it's just a prep chef, or ideally protecting your IP is a very it's hard, but it's also one of your distinct competitive advantages. But it's difficult because we've seen enough examples of people leaving us and copy pasting what we do.
So, Rahul, if I were to play devil's advocate here, that it's been happening before you gigged.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can't stop it.
With your property. You can't stop it.
But again, Rahul, I wanted to ask you, this does not happen in London because the gig guys know, or is that a different kind of a setup? Is there a different attitude?
Yeah, I mean,
the IP is protected there, no?
Yeah, I think there's just
to a large extent.
I think there's just more than protection. Everything is just so clear. Like over here, there's so many gray areas about when you can serve alcohol, how many, everything is just a gray area, right? So these gray areas are they're made for so much uncertainty, and where there's uncertainty, all kinds of bees flock to the honey pot then, right? So I think everything is just so crystal clear. And also because of that, people are, I think so, in a way, paranoid about being legally pursued. This sue culture is so big in the West, right? For anything you can be sued, and overnight, it's not even just expensive; it's just so bad for your reputation. So I think that just makes people very wary of taking pangas.
So ironically, what you're saying is that for someone to be in a gig economy where there's flexibility, you need a strong framework.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's so new to India, right? So I
like the way you put it. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps, which is why I think a lot of bottom of the pyramid workers, I think, as you said, Bikramjit, earlier, right? Their first motivation is very much a Maslow pyramid, right? They just want roti kapda makan, they want to get by. And in that, if they're going to pick up a little bit of your tricks and a little bit of your IP, frankly, beyond a point, so be it, right? Somebody invented a butter chicken, someone invented a kali dal one day, once upon a time.
And it's all over.
It's all over the world, right? So sushi is no different. So very often when people say, oh, well, you copied my dish, I'm like, but how do vanilla ice cream is vanilla ice cream. There's a better one. Pizza is pizza. So unless it's so, and I think the world's getting so more and more niche, but the more niche we feel it's becoming, I think it's also getting very homogenous, right? So it's where you draw a line, unless it's so blatant that
So actually, even again, another point of view here, Rahul, is let's say, for example, I approach your restaurant as a journalist. I approach your restaurant and I say, can your chef pick the dish, and we're going to videograph it and put it on YouTube. I'm sure you'll happily do it and you'll give out your recipe to thousands or millions of people.
No. Recipe is not given out. Dominic, I've been doing
There are
food
so many
programs.
guys doing YouTube.
Boss,
Yeah.
I've done food programs for 7 years. I had Secret Kitchen, which I anchored and thing. Recipes, you know, the chef knows. You don't give
Okay, you're
exact
saying-
recipes. You never give exact recipes. You do to some extent, which are standardized recipes, but otherwise you can easily not give the right recipe.
Okay. What levels of designation we've answered that? There's one question, and I think this would be our last question because we're coming into time. The question I'm going to clarify it because it just says, can I make good money as a gigger? So what I think the person means to ask is, can I make more money as a gigger as opposed to being on a job full time?
I think
Again,
it all really depends on your differentiator. I think if you have something very strong, you can leverage the shit out of it. If you don't have
So
something
let me put it this way, Rahul. Is the answer a yes or a no, and then explain it?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. But like I said, if you have a very strong differentiator, like let's say if you have a certain skill which is so unique to you, and that is obviously, I'm assuming, has a demand in the market, and especially stuff that can't be coached, so let's say something like copywriting. Bikramjit will know this, being a writer. Copywriting really requires a gift with words, knowing what to say when, how to say it, when to say it, with which impact to say it. And copywriters can freelance so beautifully, right? They can work for brands, for car brands, for food brands, for shoe brands. It could be anything. And you can't coach that. You can't teach it. It's not something like Excel where you just learn it and you get upskilled, right? It's inherent in you. So I think even cooking, for that matter, you can stand in front of a master chef, and when he's gone away, you'll see your Nihari or your Halim will not be the same, because there's certain things are inherent with when to put the flame on, when to put it off, etc., etc. So if you have that, I think you have, the world is your oyster. I think if you don't have it, there's a lot of hard work involved and all of that, of course, but it's a lot easier if you have something very inherently differentiated about you.
Bikramjit, you want to add to that?
I agree with Rahul, but again, you probably have to work much harder than if you had a job. Being a gigger, you have to work constantly skilling yourself. You have to, let's put it this way. My brother's a painter, and I would, my older brother's a painter, so I always used to think, oh, he's got an easy life, no issues, he sits at home and he does a painting and it gets sold. Then you realize that his biggest critic is himself. Once that happens, you're screwed, because it's very difficult to please yourself and you have to, as a gigger, because you're independent, it's you have to have that faith, determination, as well as confidence in what you are doing.
Also, and also personality type, right? Like if you have a proneness to boredom, if you have short attention spans, and if that's your personality type, then this is perfect for you, right? Because otherwise your CV will look like a butterfly. You'll just be everywhere for 4 months. Technically, you've been gigging all this while, it's just on a CV. Mm-hmm. So, and it looks ridiculous. No one's going to hire you beyond a point, because they realize you have no loyalty, and then you're sort of scratching your mind or head saying, so I think if you have that personality type, it's definitely for you, because that way, at least that level of boredom, that level of constant refreshment, renewal is out there for you. You can do it. You're not wedded to something.
And also,
so I'd like to add,
specialize, but also you can do multiple things. Yeah. I mean, the world is your oyster. Do 3 things at the same time. Why not?
Yeah. In fact, there's in the West, they call these people hypheners. You know the hyphen? Mm-hmm. So if you say I'm a, I don't know, writer, graphic designer. So, instead of saying I'm just a writer. So this has become very big in the West. That
I'm a jazz dancer, barista, chef.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So these hypheners have become very big now.
By the way, Rahul and Bikramjit, when I started off, I was running my own business, catering business, but I didn't have much business because I just started off. So I worked with 3 different caterers at the same time as their supervisor. And honestly speaking, although you said, you have to have a niche, I didn't have a niche as such. I was a chef with one. I was a supervisor for the service for the other 2. I got an offer for a full-time job from a lady, you know, to take over her central kitchen or assist with the central kitchen. And I said, listen, by then I had got the taste of freelancing. So I said, listen, I'm not going to join you full-time. You tell me the amount you'll pay and I will deliver whatever it is you want. So she tried it out for 3 months and it worked for her. We never discussed it at the end of 3 months. She gave me an increment. She was paying me just 2,500 a month at that time. When I decided to leave her about 11 years later, I was getting a paycheck, a regular paycheck, which was over 11 years with monthly increments. And I think I was in the tune of around 40K for part-time work. And I also got another consultancy for another organization, which again lasted 11 years, monthly paychecks. Maybe every 3 years, 4 years, they would increase it. So I did these 2 gigs with these 2 companies for 11 years, plus ran my own business and worked with other caterers and set up a restaurant for somebody and set up a restaurant for myself and flopped it in 6 months and went to Dubai for 3 months. So there was a lot of potential.
But just to clarify to all the people wanting to get into the gig economy with the current situation, don't expect 40,000 a month for part-time work.
Actually, not really, but we'll debate this. See, it is the talent or the skill you bring in and what you are delivering at.
Confidence, the confidence
not
with
the
which you
confidence also. See, Rahul, I work with Rahul closely. I know he pays phenomenally. I mean, for certain tasks because they are very creative in their outlook and stuff like that. Even his interior guys, I mean, they have really quirky restaurants. You must, if any of you listening and have not been to Azure restaurant, you should go, especially the Sly Stories. Amazing quirky stuff. Mama Goto also, the way they've done it up, brilliant. And even their ad campaigns and stuff like that. I mean, quirky it doesn't begin it.
Thank you.
Should share with you when I stepped into their office in Delhi, in Okla, the first time. I mean, the quirkiness just hits you and you say, I want to be here. I mean, that is my first reaction, by the way, Rahul. I don't think I ever told you that. But you just step in there and you say, this is where I want to be. You know, it's brilliant. Anyway, so I'm taking one last question. Can you, Rahul, this is for you. Can you explain to us what you mean by being more and more niche, but more homogeneous?
No,
I
didn't say be more homogeneous. I was just saying that as the world is evolving in hospitality, what was a niche 8-9 years ago is common fodder today.
Okay.
So you have to keep evolving, right? So coming back to, let's say,
got you.
Yeah, so that's what I meant. In terms of niche, like I said, what's very big, Bikramjit will say this right now, hyper-regional cuisines are very big now, or a particular, we were mentioning about that beef brisket example earlier, a particular technique or even a particular dish, or a particular skill within the kitchen. For example, sushi chefs are in huge demand. How many of them are good? Probably 1 out of 100, right? Maybe if I'm being sort of kind to the others. So there's a need of the hour. How do you come onto that bandwagon and kind of spot the gaps, right? I think that's very key as a freelancer. You have to see where the gaps are.
So to translate what you just said, or to help me understand it, what you're saying is earlier, let's say Indian cuisine was the niche. Today you're saying making a particular kebab within Indian cuisine is the niche.
Yeah, and maybe like 2 years later, it'll be like of that kebab, smoking it and doing something in it. It just gets
basically,
but that's evolution, right? So
it's the most OCD. It's the most OCD profession around, and getting more OCD as the decades go forward.
Got you. Okay, so great talking to Rahul and Bikramjit. A lot of insights, and I particularly like the last one which Rahul pointed out, where or Vikram put it as an OCD, getting really detailed oriented in getting closer and closer to the finer points. And this is a good message for our students also to realize that you don't have to specialize in a particular cuisine, but go down. So what we call an inch wide but a mile deep in learning. So that's great having you guys on the show.
And lastly, just one last thing is this is also, I don't know if there's anyone on this here, but I think our hospitality schools in India need to really smell the coffee, because they're still teaching, which is good to know that the basics are there. They still want to teach you the 5 mother sauces and mayonnaise and hollandaise and all this stuff. But I think they need to sort of re-evaluate where you know,
The
the speed
syllabus.
at which, the speed at which the world is moving and what's being taught there's a big disconnect there. So a lot of these
Yeah.
kids come out of school thinking they know what hospitality is, but they're so unaware of the sort of speed at which things are being operated on. So it's just something I
Yeah,
wanted to bring up because you
so
mentioned.
we've got Shirish Bokde, we've got Peter Sequeira, we've got Navdeep Deshpande, all from hospitality schools on the line. So I'm sure they've heard you. And maybe I missed a couple of names. Anyway, so been great talking to you guys. Thank you very much. God bless. Keep rocking. Thanks, audience, for listening.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for
all of
having
you
us.
on Facebook Live. Yep. Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. God bless.